Hey guys, Modelling Weekly here. Well, the time has come for another group build summary video, and this time it's a pretty big one. For the second community group build, our Discord members voted for the topic of D-Day, more specifically the Normandy invasion in general. This turned out to be a brilliant topic with a lot of engagement and excitement for it, and it definitely shows in the quality of these builds. So, before we get into these excellent entries, I've got a couple of things to mention. For starters, I want to give a massive thank you once again to Aidan over on my Discord server, as without him these group builds would quite literally be impossible due to my awful memory and time management. But in all seriousness, he is absolutely brilliant and truly dedicated. I mean, he wrote up an entire algorithm to select the winning topic for our current GB. If that isn't commitment, I don't know what is. Speaking of that new group build, if you unfortunately missed out on the D-Day GB, don't worry about it. We are currently hosting a Pacific Theatre group build over on my Discord, link in the description, so by all means come over and join in with that. So with that said, let's have a look at these entries. For the sake of organisation, I've put them into 3 different categories: non-competition entries, competition, and finally the winner along with 2 runners-up. Let's start off with the non-competition builds. This is of course the category where my BF109 falls. I'm not going to spend much time covering this kit as I've already made a full-length build video which you can find on my channel. Overall it was a very nice kit with beautiful detail and exceptional quality as you'd expect from Eduard these days. Moving along now, we have Aidan's build, Airfix's fairly new tool 172 scale bowfighter. Now, for what he claims to be a somewhat rushed build, I think it's an absolutely brilliant result. There's a perfect amount of tonal variation across the surface, and the weathering is subtle yet effective. I especially like that controlled yet realistic chipping. I'd say it definitely turned out a lot more interesting than my one from a while back. But yeah, absolutely brilliant work as per usual from Aidan. Finally, in the non-competition category, we have a wonderful Willys Jeep from James Blonde. It's always nice to see one of these iconic American vehicles, and especially fitting given the group build topic. James's build of this kit is very nice and clean, and paired with some smooth and accurate paintwork. Personally, I have never been a huge fan of factory fresh models, as I'm a bit of a sucker when it comes to weathering. However, I'm actually a massive fan of this build despite that. Very nice work. Now, onto the competition builds. Please keep in mind that the builds in this section are in no particular order, so don't worry about the position of your build in this list, they are all equally fantastic. Right, let's start off with Aaron's incredibly clean C47 Skytrain, for which he used Airfix's 72nd scale kit. Now, on the whole, this build is incredibly well done, however there are some bits here and there that I particularly like. One of these has to be the J8 decal on the left hand side of the fuselage. The way that it conforms to the raised surface detail is just beautiful. Those painted on invasion stripes are also pretty damn good, which is great to see considering how difficult they can be from time to time. I have to say that I'm also a fan of that panel wash colour. It pairs perfectly with the underside tone and works pretty well on the olive drab. Overall, a very nice build indeed. Next up, we have a 72nd scale Typhoon built by Agar Edward. In this case, it's the Academy Mark 1B boxing. Brilliant stuff here. The two-tone camo is definitely the highlight of this build, with very accurately masked transitions between the 2 colours. The transition between upper and lower colours is also very nicely done, with no signs of leaks or overspray. Aside from all that, it's always a pleasure to see some Typhoons in a group build. Very good stuff. Coming up now, we have yet another Willys Jeep, and this time brought to you by Evan266. Now, for this build, he's decided to go with a more weathered and lived-in aesthetic than James's variant, though I think they both have their place. The dust effects that Evan has added to his Jeep are on point and really bring the model to life. This goes hand in hand with that really nice front bumper. The rope that's been hinted at here is actually really nice looking, and it really effectively breaks up the smooth olive drab finish that these Jeeps are famous for. On the whole, another very nice model. Next up is a 1/72 scale Mark IV Spitfire, manufactured by Italeri and made by Hamish's Heinkels. Now, we don't normally see many Mark IV builds around, as the Spitfire domain is sort of dominated by the classic Mark Vs, Mark IXs, and of course the Mark 1A. So seeing a build of this aircraft was nice. Hamish seems to have done a pretty good job of getting a clean edge between the two colours of the camo, and the decals on the whole have also conformed pretty well. So thank you for your submission, Hamish, it's highly appreciated. Now, it wouldn't be an Overlord group build without a trusty landing craft making the cut. This LCM and Sherman combo in 72 scale was submitted by Scale Modelling Magic, and I have to say that the best of a bad situation has been made out of this kit. It was made pretty clear that it's not the best kit in the world to begin with, but I think Modelling Magic handled the problems faced in the build pretty damn well, and has produced a nice looking result. The paint is nice and smooth, along with a sharp transition between hull red and light grey. A nice build overall. Okay, you're probably going to want to grab some popcorn for this segment, because we're about to have a look at Rawrex's literal fleet of entries. Now, if you aren't familiar with good old Rawrex, then it's probably worth mentioning that he's a big fan of replicating Second World War factory production lines when it comes to the amount of aircraft he builds. I'll cut to the chase. He submitted 8 different models for this group build. Yep, let's dive into them now. Why not start with this Hellcat? And this little 72nd scale model has been very nicely put together with a brilliant hand-brushed paint scheme to match. We especially liked the invasion stripes on this particular model, as they are perfectly crisp and pretty damn straight. It's also worth noting that Rawrex almost exclusively builds old kits, so the results are even more impressive considering this. Venturing into the domain of gliders now, let's have a look at his Wacko and Horsa duo. Both of these aircraft have been done up very nicely indeed, with the RAF two-tone night camo really popping on the Horsa. I'm not sure what decal solution he's been using, but it has definitely worked a treat on both of these gliders and the rest of his submissions. The way they conform is very solid indeed. Really nice job on these. The next aircraft has to be one of my favourites out of the builds Rawrex submitted for this group build. Marauders are always good, but this kit in 1/72 scale has been given an extra flashy camo scheme to go with it. Once again, the decal work is top notch, and so is the again hand painted finish. Extra credit goes to Rawrex here, as bare metal is a notoriously hard colour to paint with a hand brush. Excellent work yet again. Well, we're returning once again to the realm of the C-47 Skytrain. Rawrex has painted his up in a sort of dark green paint scheme, paired with the standard medium grey that goes on the bottom of most Skytrains. You can tell a lot of work has been put into hiding any gaps or seam lines on this aircraft, as it really is practically flawless in that area. Decals are of course in order, and the paintwork is nice. Another sweet build from Rawrex. Next up, it's another Spitfire, this time dressed in quite a unique paint scheme. Rawrex has gone for what I believe is a photo reconnaissance scheme, meaning the sole colour of this aircraft is light pink. It's great seeing these specialist Spitfires here and there, as it's a nice change from the usual suspects that I mentioned earlier. Rawrex, it was a very nice idea to include this build in your lineup. Lastly, and I say that lightly, is Rawrex's depiction of a classic swordfish torpedo bomber dressed up in, of course, D-Day markings. I've always quite liked the appearance of the swordfish, and this build is just a perfect representation of the aircraft. That engine is really nicely painted, and the copper coloured cowling is on point. I'm also a big fan of that rigging, which I know can be a bit of a pain when it comes to biplane aircraft. Overall, an absolutely fantastic build yet again from Rawrex. So then, it's at last time to move on to the top 3 submissions of the group build. Before we take a look, I just want to reiterate that not making it into these top 3 doesn't by any means say that your build is bad or below average, not at all. Both me and Aidan had to work especially hard to try and select the top 3 from the crowd, as there were just so many high-ranking submissions in the group build, and I'm very grateful for this enthusiasm. So without further ado, let's check these builds out. Coming in at the number 3 spot, we have, drumroll please, Rawrex's 8th submission, a Vickers Wellington in 1/72 scale. Now, the reason why we had to give the third place spot to this build was almost entirely down to that wonderful hand brush paintwork. We truly don't know how he does it, but Rorex has managed to get a near flawless finish with a hand brush whilst using white paint, which is probably the hardest colour to brush on regardless. Hell, I sometimes even struggle painting it with my airbrush. But in all seriousness, this is a very effective build created using an unoptimum kit in terms of age. A huge well done to you, Rorex. Now, the number 2 spot is where it gets a little interesting, and that's down to the fact that 2 builds share this space. No matter how much we thought about it, we couldn't think of a good way to split them up. So, second place goes to Callsign Cripple with his Panther diorama, and Joso with his Typhoon Airfield diorama. Let's take a look at the Panther to begin with. I have to say, this build really stood out to me from the moment it was submitted. Personally, it very effectively tells a story, combining the shell penetration in the rear of the tank with the crew member being pulled from what I believe to be the driver's hatch. Correct me if I am wrong about this. The paintwork and weathering are also very admirable aspects of the build, with the chipping standing out to me the most. It's worth mentioning the vignette that the Panther is placed in as well. Callsign has done a great job of creating a convincing street scene here, and I think it really pairs well with the Panther. Overall, a very impressive and interesting build. Thank you so much for submitting this. Okay, we're coming up to a big one now. Some of you may remember that in the last GB, Joso submitted Airfix's B17G in 72nd scale, a pretty serious build in of itself. So I guess this time he wanted to top that size, creating an entire airfield diorama featuring a pair of Typhoons, an RAF resupply crew, and foliage to go with it. The attention to detail in this base is great, with both me and Aidan commenting on how well he has managed to make it look busy whilst not overcrowding the scene. It really effectively tells a story that he intended. The aircraft themselves are built and painted to a very nice standard, as are the other diorama elements. The family of badges were also a nice touch. Absolutely brilliant work from Joso here. So here we are, onto the last but certainly not least submission, taking the first place spot. So without further ado, the winner of the second Modelling Weekly group build based around the Normandy invasion is PPA with his absolutely stunning monogram B-26 Marauder in 1/48th scale. And yep, you heard me correctly, this is in fact a monogram kit, featuring a very old tooling. This fact, however, was simply shrugged off by PPA as he removed all of the raised panel lines, replacing them with scribed and riveted panels. This has essentially turned the kit into a modern looking tooling, so you can imagine me and Aidan were seriously impressed. Another cool Easter egg with this build are the offensive gun barrels on the front underside of the aircraft. They're 3D printed. I would never have guessed just by looking at them. The weathering that has been done to the aircraft is also absolutely stunning. I really like the fact that fuel spatter marks have been applied to the upper surfaces of the wings where the filler caps are. This is such a nice touch alongside the rest of the kit. Overall, an absolute stunner of a model, and I think the first place spot is thoroughly deserved. Now, as with the last GB's winner, it's time to promote PPA social media so that he can get the credit he deserves. He has an Instagram account where he posts various pictures of his models, so please do check him out and drop a follow, he deserves it. His account is called Daluvian, I hope I didn't butcher that too much, so the link will be down in the description. Well, that pretty much wraps up the D-Day group build hosted on my Discord server. Thank you so much to all that entered and submitted a build, with a huge congrats to PPA for winning the GB overall. I'd also like to say again a big thanks to Aidan for all his help with the GB and the GB that we've just started now, based on the Pacific Theatre. Remember, you can come and join in with that on my Discord server, the link is in the description, and it's running until the 15th of April next year, so there's loads of time. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. Remember to comment your favourite build down below and leave a like if you enjoyed. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!